writing, Toby Beth Johnson, Burnt Store title of Southwest Florida, bringing you episode 10 of Moving Parts. Abby's special guest in the studio today is Mr. Ian Vincent of Ian Vincent and Associates. Oh no, it's a gopher tortoise. Oh no, it's a scrub jay. Oh no, it's a burrowing owl. Oh no, it could be wetlands. Stick around. Find out how you can know if these are on your property and how you can contact Ian Vincent and Associates to come out for a nominal fee and check out your vacant land before you build on it.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to episode 10 of Moving Parts. I'm Abby Hamilton, the Realtor gal next door, partnered with Burnt Store title of Southwest Florida. Today we have a wonderful guest, Ian Vincent, an environmental consultant. So we are so happy. If you weren't aware, by the time this episode comes out, the hurricane would have passed, but it is en route right now. So we are here to give you the latest and greatest information in the industry. But we appreciate you tuning in, and when this episode airs, we hope you are all safe and well at that time. So thank you for tuning in, and thank you, Ian, for, I know you have a busy schedule, obviously, so we appreciate you hopping in to share some insights with us.
Sure thing.
So first off, let's just touch on what you do and maybe what your job covers, so give people a little backing.
So the way that I explain it to most people, because nobody understands what we do, is my job is to, when you're looking at a property, to tell you, to, for lack of a better term, things that might cost you money, cost you time, or require a permit in the environmental world.
Okay, and as a person, everybody wants to save money
Right.
and time.
Right. So in this area, the biggest thing that has changed is the gopher tortoises. We'll get way into, we'll dive deep into that later. But up until a few years ago, very few people were requiring environmental assessments on raw land for single-family lots.
Okay.
Larger properties, yes, but single-family lots, for the most part, you go into it knowing there might be a small problem. A few years ago, the gopher tortoise cost quintupled. So it went from being a kind of a nuisance and a little bit of money to an, oh my Lord,
they might reconsider their purchase.
Now the tortoises are going to cost me more than the property is worth. So it's really created a huge change in our industry, and probably your industry as well.
Absolutely.
But now when people call me, whether it's a realtor or just an individual, and they ask me, what do I need to know about a property? And I'm not saying this tongue in cheek. I literally say this to everyone. If you don't hire me, please hire somebody, because I will be the one who gets the call 6 months from now, 10 months from now, whenever you're ready to build, and the county or the city has identified this environmental problem. So that the short version is my job is to tell you what might be wrong and tell you how much it's going to cost to deal with it.
Okay. So I appreciate you giving a little bit of information on that. Now, let's talk about, you already hinted, what are your top services that you are having to offer right now?
In Charlotte County, it's primarily the preliminary lot inspections, and then if you have gopher tortoises, we obviously do the gopher tortoise permitting and go through that whole process with you. As you get more into Cape Coral has a really serious burrowing owl, I won't say problem, they're a protected species, it really shouldn't be considered a problem, but it's an issue.
Okay.
And we do hundreds of burrowing owl permits in Cape Coral, which, unlike tortoises, owls are not that expensive, but there are very huge limitations on when you can do things as far as clearing the property.
Okay.
So you essentially have about a 5-month window that you can't touch the land if you have owls on it, even if you have the permit.
Okay.
So tortoises and owls are 1 and 2. In Charlotte County, we're very fortunate that the scrub jay issue is not what it was 10 years ago. It still kind of stinks because you have to pay a fee. I don't call it a fine. Some people do, but you have to pay a fee. But basically that fee makes it so that you don't have to get any permits on your own. Whereas if we were in Sarasota County or Lee County, if you had scrub jays on your property, you don't have that option of going through the county's process. You have to actually get a permit from the Fish and Wildlife Service on your own, which is a 8 to 10 month process.
Okay.
And can cost anywhere from $30,000 to $50,000 on a single family lot.
Wow.
Right. So, the big things are, it's primarily gopher tortoises. One thing that a lot of people overlook is we do have some wetlands in Charlotte County in areas that you would never expect to have a wetland. Previously platted quarter-acre lots, looks just like the lot next door, but unless you have an environmental expert that knows what to look for a wetland, you don't know that you have a wetland. And wetlands, much like scrub jays, are very, very expensive to mitigate. It's typically somewhere on the order of $20,000 to $30,000 for a quarter acre.
Okay.
So those are the biggies.
So what are some things that when you're checking out on these lots or larger parcels, what are things that you're looking for, or what are things you see that you know that species is around?
Right. So gopher tortoises, the one good thing about it, they're very easy to identify because they live in a big hole in the ground. Typically, there's a large mound of sand outside of the hole. So most people, if they're willing to crawl on their hands and knees through the bush, most people can find a gopher tortoise on their own.
Okay.
So that's primarily what we're looking for. With wetlands, it's a lot more technical. Wetlands, you have to have three things. You have to have wetland vegetation, wetland soils, and evidence of hydrology, which
So those are things that a specialist would definitely recognize.
And we run into it all the time where people have purchased a property, they go in for the permitting, the county says, we think you have a wetland, and the first thing they say to me is, well, I've never seen any water on that.
Okay.
That's not how it works. And wetlands really are a more technical thing. Just about anybody who's willing to put on some jeans and get a machete can go look for tortoises on their property. But those are the two biggies.
Okay. And then with the burrowing owls, how do you spot those typically?
Very similar to tortoises.
Okay.
They live in a hole in the ground. It's not, it's a much smaller hole because they're a smaller animal. It doesn't have as big of an area, but because it's in Cape Coral, which is essentially moonscaped, they're very easy to identify. You could be 100 feet away and you can see a hole when it's just a grass field.
Okay.
But burrowing owls they're very similar to gopher. And again, you need someone like us because to be able to tell the difference between a gopher tortoise and a burrowing owl. If you don't see the actual animal,
there's a big expense and process. It varies a lot.
They're two completely different paths, and the last thing you would ever want to do is buy a property on the assumption that you have one or the other and find out that you're wrong, because it will change your entire outlook on it.
Okay. So another question I would have is, say someone is looking to buy this piece of land. You inspect it, everything looks good, but they're not planning on building on it until, like you said, maybe a few years down the road. What is the situation if something appears then?
That's the hardest part of my job.
Okay.
Is when people say, what kind of guarantee do you have, or what kind of warranty do you have?
And nature's nature.
Well,
So.
we're dealing with wild animals that have the freedom to roam.
Yeah.
So again, kind of jokingly, I tell people, this is from the moment we were there, not even the day we were there. All I can do is tell you what exists today. Gopher tortoises are a great example. They move around. Tortoises, some of them use 2 or 3 different holes to live in. So I could go to your property. There's no burrows, or there's 2 burrows. The minute I leave, the tortoise across the street could decide to wander over and dig a hole. Conversely, I could say, I saw 2 holes. I saw a tortoise in each hole. The minute I leave, they get run over or they wander off or whatever. So it really is very much a snapshot, Polaroid kind of thing. That said, it's very unusual to see a significant change. If we go to a lot and there are no tortoises, and we're not allowed to trespass and go on neighbors, but we look. So, I could be looking at a lot for you and there's no burrows on it, but this lot over here has 3. When I give you that report, I'm going to mention, hey, by the way, this one was clean, but there's 3 tortoises next door. It's entirely possible one could come over.
Okay.
And the converse of that is also true. If I find 3 burrows on your property, you pretty much are going to have to assume that whether you're building a month from now, a year from now, 5 years from now, there's going to be some tortoises. So it does change, but I probably count on both hands the number of times that the change was so significant that it really changed somebody's decision of whether or not they should have bought it.
Okay. Well, when you touched on earlier, you said how much the cost has increased. Can you elaborate on, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things that prices have increased, but maybe some of the reasoning to why that has shot up so fast?
It's very simple. It's very simple supply and demand economics. So with gopher tortoises, most of the time you on a normal sized lot, if you don't have a larger lot, you really don't have the ability to keep them on the property and stay within the state guidelines. So you're required to do what's called an off-site relocation. And we do that permitting, and truthfully, it's the same amount of work for us whether you do it on-site or off-site. So our fees are flat, but it's a big difference in cost. So when you take the tortoises off-site, the state requires that you take them to what's called a permitted recipient site, which are large, thousands of acres, private land that have been set aside for tortoises. They're managed for tortoises. And those people are given a finite number of tortoises they're allowed to accept, typically about 2 tortoises per acre. So all of these rules came into effect around 2008-ish, when all the relocation requirements came in. So for many years, and of course there was also not a whole lot of building going on, so there wasn't a giant demand. So for many, many years, the recipient sites that took the tortoises were charging between $800 and $1,000 each, which stinks. But if you've got a couple, you can typically find a way to still not have that destroy your dream of building a house. Somewhere right around the mid, like 2015-ish, 2016, when demand started going up, they started raising prices a little bit, but it never got crazy. They went up to, depending on where you took them, between $1,200 and $1,500 per tortoise.
Okay.
Still not great, but also not terrible. And this is a long story, so I'm just gonna I'm gonna give you, because it's
give us a snapshot.
It's very simple supply and demand. And it's very complicated to understand why it happened. So we have all these sites, and there was one site that had space for 19,000 tortoises.
Wow.
And nobody used them because they were not easy to work with. They required deposits up front. They required references. So none of us in the world ever, in the environmental world, ever used them because there were other sites that were much easier to deal with for the same price. And their price was around $1,200. Somewhere around March, April of 21, there was one consultant who was managing about 10 of these recipient sites that we were all using. And they got in really big trouble with the state. They had, allegedly, they were not doing all of the things they were required to do. They'd fallen behind on reporting. They weren't maintaining enclosures. And the state, it was a Friday afternoon at 4 o'clock, because I'll never forget it, the state shut down all of their sites.
Wow.
And what that meant was everybody who had an existing permit, whether they had moved their tortoises there or not, their permit immediately was suspended. All of us who had applied for permits using those, the capacity at those sites, those now had to be changed. And this was spring of 21, development's going crazy. So for me personally, I had 168 permits that got suspended on that day, which was a really bad weekend.
Yeah,
because
I can imagine.
I had 168 people saying, "Why did I get an email saying my permit's been suspended?" So we started going to other places, and it was like that we used up all the space from all of the other people, and all that was left was the people with the 19,000.
Gotcha.
With those people, they're a huge, I don't even know how many thousands of acres they have. But tortoises were not their main business. They had one person who was their wildlife manager, and his job was overseeing the tortoise program, but he was also in charge of deer feeders and counting turkeys. Like, he was their hunting guy too. So this guy went from maybe once or twice a month having to deal with tortoises to every consultant in the bottom half of Florida was now not just asking him, "I have 100 permits, I need you to." So they got overwhelmed.
Okay.
And it literally is one guy. So they get overwhelmed, and the company decides, okay, we're going to have to hire people, and we're going to raise our prices. So I'll skip a bunch of steps, but the bottom line is that was April. In July of 21, their price went to $6,000 per tortoise.
Wow.
They went from 1,200, it was incremental, 1,200, 1,800, 2,000, and then it jumped from 25 to 5. In August, they announced we're going to $6,000 a tortoise, and we're not going to give any reservations for a month at least because we're so far behind, we can't keep up with it. So for a month, almost nobody was able to even apply for a tortoise. And that was at the same time where the governor signed an emergency order that made it so that you could take tortoises from anywhere in the state to this site. The rules, the way they're written is you're not allowed to take a tortoise more than 100 miles north or south because they're cold-blooded animals, and the ones that live here are very different than the ones that live in Panama City.
Mm-hmm.
They signed that executive order because this was the only place in the entire state of Florida. So they just got bombarded.
So on top of all the building setbacks, this
Bam.
environmental impact really did play a huge role in the acceleration of what projects could get done.
Right. So it blew up the world is the best way to put it. So when they came back from their little moratorium at $6,000 a tortoise, of course, you can imagine, I'm sure you had clients.
Yeah.
I had clients that had bought a property based on my evaluation a year before, where I said,
and who knew that?
I would always put a caveat,
Yeah.
these prices are subject to change. We
Yeah,
can't control
absolutely.
the recipient sites. But if you had said, hey, Ian, bet all of your money on whether or not tortoises are going to go from 1,200 to 6,000 in 4 months, I would have bet it all that they wouldn't.
Wow.
So that happened, and it was bad, and we got through it. Well, because the prices went up, a lot of landowners who really didn't have any interest in entering the program before suddenly did.
Because they're like as a business opportunity.
It's, 1,200, if I can sell 2 tortoises at $1,200, it's $2,400. They only get to keep about half of that by the time they pay consultants and everything else. So it really wasn't worth it. Well, suddenly, Mr. DeSoto County cattle rancher with 5,000 acres says I can make $5,000 an acre and still keep running my cattle. So a whole bunch of new sites came on, and we all got really excited. Number one, we didn't have to go to that other company anymore, but we got really excited because maybe this would drop the prices, and it dropped it all the way down to $5,250.
Oh, wow.
Because, and here's the thing,
Yeah.
and people are always like, oh, why is it so much? If it was my land and somebody said, Mr. Vincent, you can either make $2,000 an acre or $6,000 an acre. I'm never going to say 2,000.
Mm-hmm.
So that's where we are today. The good news now is there's plenty of capacity. There's room for tens of thousands of tortoises.
But there's
Bad news is they're $5,000 a piece.
comes at a cost.
And so I realize that was very long, but there truly is no 30-second explanation of why we are where we are.
It's interesting to see how, because I was in it, like hearing the other side when it became such a hot topic, because obviously it picked up in such a short amount of time, to where we are at now, and how it is a big caution for people to, some people are like, oh, I can just move the turtle myself, but maybe touch on what are some of the reasons why people cannot do this.
Well, that's a crime.
Yes, and I don't think people realize,
and it's a real crime, and they are charging people, which they weren't for a long time, because it wasn't happening there. With the cost being what it is. Otherwise, people who otherwise would have followed the rules are now incentivized to maybe not.
Okay.
And you can imagine if somebody tells you have 3 tortoises on your property,
that's a significant amount of money.
$18,000, or I can just I can go sit there for an hour, wait for one to come out. I'm not going to kill it, but just pick it up and take it to the park. And if I don't get caught, that was a $6,000 risk. People are taking that risk more and more.
Yeah.
So it happens. There actually is a process where you can do it yourself as a homeowner.
Okay.
I've probably given that information to 100 people over the years, and maybe 2 were successful, because it sounds easy, but then you get into this website and they're using words that you've never heard before.
There's a reason you're a specialist.
Right. They're asking, they don't ask me to fix your fridge. I can't.
Yeah.
So they're asking questions with words you've never heard before, and the requirements are very specific for people who can. It's very, very few folks actually get there. I've helped a few through it that were, they were right at the very end, and they just were like, I don't know, I don't
They
know
were
what,
so close.
I don't know what recipient area means.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, this is what recipient area means.
Okay.
So there is that process. But yeah, for the most part, FWC is not playing around. And what a lot of people don't understand is that if you do something, it's not some nerd biologist coming, it's an actual cop. The FWC law enforcement, I mean, they carry guns and tasers and can arrest you just like the sheriff, and they will. I've actually seen multiple people have their rights read to them on the side of the road in Lehigh, because they knowingly, the land clearing guy's there, and he was like, well, I told them there was a burrow, and they told me to go ahead and run it over because nobody knew about it. Well, guess what? You get a lawyer, because, I mean, nobody's going to jail for it, but it's going to cost you more than the problem would have cost.
Well, and there's a reason it's a protected species. So, I mean, I love my wildlife too. So I know people are, it's, you got to kind of find that middle ground, because I know there's people on one extreme and then there's people on the other.
Absolutely.
And so it's one of those, how can we have an environment where we enjoy the wildlife, but you got to live too. So it's finding that.
My little running joke is everybody loves tortoises until they have one.
Yeah.
And then they don't love them as much as they used to.
So what kind of costs can someone look into when wanting you to come out to check out a piece of land?
So our kind of flat fee for anything Lee, Charlotte, Sarasota, because we're based right in the center of Charlotte County, so we're pretty central, is $350 for anything up to about half an acre.
Okay.
There are cases, if it's an acre in Cape Coral that's completely cleared, still $350.
Okay. It's just case by case, but
if it's under half an acre, no matter how nasty or thick it is, we're still going to hold that $350.
Okay.
It just makes life easier to just that way. I have a number to tell everybody. You can pass that on to your people. You don't have to call me on every job and go, is this one a $275 or a $295?
And that's great to know. And I mean, for peace of mind, people are going to start reconsidering that more now that they know what kind of cost that they could accrue by.
Right. And it's really easy for me to say because I'm the one that makes that money, but everyone should have, and I said at the beginning of this, joking around, but not really, if you don't hire me, hire somebody.
Yeah.
Because it is so important that you have professional eyes on the site, so that you there's nothing worse in building than surprises of any kind, and you don't want that surprise.
Oh, that's very true. Now, what are, to touch on, because you said before you cover a lot of different things, so maybe quickly if you can just kind of list out some of the services that you offer, maybe ones that you don't do as often, but that people know if they needed you for that, whatever that service is, that you'd be able to assist.
Sure. So it's the preliminary assessments we do. Go for tortoise permitting. Everyone in my company is authorized agent by the state of Florida to do tortoise permitting. We do burrowing owl permitting. In areas where you are required to do scrub jay surveys or scrub jay permitting, we do that. Bald eagle is another one. We could get into a long story about bald eagles.
I've heard some.
The good news about bald eagles is the protection measures are much less than they used to be, because the eagles have recovered, but there are still measures. So we handle bald eagle management plans, the monitoring that goes along with that, wetland delineations, wetland permitting. And then, there's always the little, we call them the randos, occasionally somebody is building a dock and there's seagrass. So we can do a seagrass survey for you, or it's called a benthic survey where you're looking for oysters. But essentially anything in the environmental world other than a phase one is what we provide.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, how did you get into this field? And you've been doing it, maybe we can share a little bit of how long you've been doing it, and you're a native to the area, correct?
No. Well, I'm a.
Or are you considered a Floridian by this point? Because it's been a while.
I've been here since Clinton was president, so I moved
so
here.
You're basically grandfathered in.
So basically, I have a degree in soil and water chemistry.
Okay.
And I really wanted to get into water quality, so we moved to Florida in '96, and my very first job was exactly what I thought I wanted to do, which was water quality. And then the company I worked for started getting more into what I do now,
Okay.
like dabbling in it. And the manager there was he was an ecologist. He had a background in environmental science. And of all of the water quality techs they had there, I was the only one with a degree.
Okay.
The others didn't have degrees, so he picked me not because I was any better, but hey, this guy has a degree.
Yeah.
It's not our degree, but it's a degree. So I went from he started training me, and then we'll skip a few steps.
Yeah.
I went through a couple of other companies, and just it's it's kind of a niche thing. I just landed into it. My employees, we have 5 now. I have 5 staff.
Wow.
We have one has a degree in wildlife ecology, one has a degree in environmental science. So in our field, here's the thing, nobody trains you to do this job in college. There is no college degree for gopher tortoise permitting. So to get into our field, basically when I'm interviewing people, anybody with a hard science degree, I'm a little partial to chemistry majors because I have that chemistry background. But if you come to me with any science degree, I absolutely that's how you get into this field.
Well, and what is the name of your company
Oh
specifically?
yeah, that's important.
Yeah.
It's me. It's Ian Vincent and Associates.
Okay.
I worked for a company called Dex Bender for about 11 years. I ran their Port Charlotte office. During the downturn, we kind of made the mutual decision that it didn't make sense for me to be running an office with just me in it.
Okay.
So I left them in 2010 and started my firm in 2010, and we've been in Charlotte County since.
Wow. And what's being a local of the area, I've seen your signs as a child growing with all the yellow signs with Ian Vincent. If you see them, they're pointed out usually next to the gopher tortoise.
Right. So the signs are actually funny, and I started using them about 7-8 years ago, probably. And what happened was we would be doing gopher tortoise relocations, and we would find that people had messed with the burrows.
Okay.
So I bought, or a neighbor, we would be out there excavating the burrows, and a neighbor calls the county or FWC to go, oh my God, somebody's killing tortoises. So I started putting those signs up really to make my life easier, because it has my phone number. I mean, that's my cell phone. You call the number on that sign, it's going to ring in my pocket right now.
Okay.
So I put those signs up not really as a marketing tool. I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
But it really was not intended to be a marketing tool.
Well, it turned out to be one because everyone knew your name because of all these yellow signs.
It's amazing. I'll introduce myself to people, and someone like, oh, this is Ian Vincent. He does gopher tortoise work. And they're like, I live in Deep Creek. You're the yellow sign guy. And I'm like, yeah, I'm the yellow sign guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, the signs were not on purpose to be a marketing tool.
It was to make your life easier.
But I mean, like Cape Coral is a great example. I had one builder there, and wasn't really marketing to Cape Coral. Started putting the signs up, and now probably a third of our work is Cape Coral.
Wow.
Because if you're a builder driving around, and we have the same sign, you've probably never seen one. So in Cape Coral, I really have never really marketed that area. I had one builder there that had us doing their tortoise and owl work. And because of the signs, other builders driving around see them. And we have the same sign in Cape Coral with an owl on it instead of a tortoise. Again, because
that's your
so
prevalent.
It's real. It was kind of, I'm a marketing genius
Yeah.
on accident, because I had no intention at all of having that be a revenue stream, but it's turned into a really, really good thing for the company.
Well, and good for you for growing your business and becoming, obviously you're passionate about helping people, and you're also passionate about the environment we live in. So what has been so rewarding about the career that you've chosen?
It's going to sound cheesy. I really do like helping people. And I'm always empathetic and sympathetic, because like I said, I get the phone call, and for a lot of these people, I won't say it's the worst day of their life, because it's not, but it's a really bad day when they discover that this thing that they've never heard of, I'm from New Jersey, we eat turtles. I hear that one all the time. Oh, we eat turtles where I'm from. And I'm like, well, we don't here, or you shouldn't. But I really do. There is a lot of reward from, I've been involved in the development community for so long. So I've been part of different organizations, and I like seeing people I remember when I built my first house, that moment when you're like, oh God, it's finally here. I love helping getting them over the finish line. The other side of it is I wouldn't be in this field if I didn't love nature and the environment. It is really fun to, go out and dig up a hole and pull that tortoise out, knowing that if we didn't, that tortoise would be dead.
Very true.
So that part's also very rewarding.
Well, I've loved seeing your legacy build in the community. I think you have so much knowledge to share, and I think it is important for folks to, obviously I haven't really seen as much slowdown with construction and development, and it's going to continue. And for those to have peace of mind and be able to save money and also know that, they are protecting a species in the process, it is good to have a great resource. So if anyone is looking or knows someone that's looking and has a need for this service, Ian Vincent is someone I highly recommend. And he or one of his members now, because you have several staff members, will be able to assist in whether it's identifying or relocating or any of the other services that you have mentioned. So what is the go-to contact that you would recommend?
Yeah, here's a good one. My cell phone, and it is 941-457-6272. I do have a website.
Okay.
It's ivaenvironmental.com.
Okay.
You can guess by looking at me that it's a very fancy website, but no, it's the world's worst website. Yeah. But if you go there, it has my email address on it. If you'd rather reach me by email,
to the point, and that's what matters.
But yeah, those are the two best ways to get me.
Perfect. Well, we hope you learned some interesting facts, and if you didn't know about our wildlife, you caught a glimpse of some of the things that we experience here in Florida. And we hope that you will continue to listen to our podcast, share it, and help educate others around us. So thank you for tuning in, and we'll catch you next time.
Hey folks, Toby Beth Johnson, Burnt Store Title of Southwest Florida, coming to you once again. Thanks for sticking around. Hope you learned a little bit something about buying vacant land here in our sunny Southwest Florida piece of paradise. That brings us to our Tuesday title tip. If you are looking to invest in a piece of vacant land, or you're looking to build on your vacant land, you're definitely going to want to take advantage of your inspection period. No, you don't need the inspection on the house because there isn't one there, but you definitely want to do your due diligence on what's on that vacant land before you sign your final paperwork. Because once you own it, now it's your responsibility to remove that wildlife if you're going to be building on that vacant land. Once again, due diligence is of the utmost importance when purchasing vacant land. Please reach out to Ian Vincent and Associates. They will definitely help you get that job done. Once again, thanks again for tuning in, folks. Toby Beth Johnson, Burnt Store Title of Southwest Florida.